Talk a little bit about what you've seen investors doing over the last 10 years. How have their interests grown, and what are they doing today?
Prior to 2005, the vast majority of inward investment into real estate was from intra-regional, mainly Hong Kong, Singapore, some Japan, developer investors. I think I'm right in saying it was 31st of January 2005 when MGPA, the Macquarie Group, bought from Capital Land what became known as Platinum Tower, the first en-bloc, arm's-length foreign investment into China. And from that day on, which was only 6 years ago, we had an institutional or quasi-institutional investment market. Most of the acquisitions that we saw being done, and certainly the ones that we were on the end of, were by foreign investors, and many of those American opportunistic funds or American IB-led American institutional funds, or opportunistic funds rather. That changed all of a sudden at the back end of 2008 with the world financial crisis. Since then, right through 2009 and 10, we have seen it being very much a domestic market. The last couple of months, as 2011 has dawned, has changed again as allocations for Asia and allocations for China particularly have become clearer for some of the Western funds.
Would you attribute the attenuation of foreign investors to the GFC entirely, or was there some other, the global financial crisis, or was there something else? Was there another dynamic going on there that?
I think there were two things. First of all, the cessation of acquisitions, yes, was mainly as a result of many of the funds that have been set up looking to repatriate those funds from parts of the world where they had seen that they could get a gain. And there were a lot of sales going through 2009 by foreign funds that were, in the main part, positive and were at a profit, and they were getting those back to their investors, basically. What has happened since, though, is the growth, if not birth, of an institutional market by Chinese institutional investors, partly as a result of the deregulation of the insurance companies, which became effective 1st of January this year, where previously they were only allowed to invest into operational premises. Now, this did sometimes mean that they would take a floor or three in an office building but buy the building. But now they can invest into office buildings, which is their main target initially, where they do not have to have any occupation, and so it's a pure asset play.
Talk to me a little bit about how you're repatriating your capital and how often you can do that, because that's something that's near and dear to, we all want our money back.
Yeah. There are three primary ways of repatriating funds in China. The first one is you would normally see in a Western environment where you're paying out dividends. So you have a bottom line net profit, just like any company. You can pay out dividends to your offshore parent. The second one is a process whereby your offshore parent lends you money, and that then comes into China as a shareholder loan, which means that you can then repatriate the interest on that loan or repatriate the principal on the loan. Mm-hmm. And the third way is a consequence of selling real estate, as a consequence of selling real estate and winding up the holding company that owns the real estate, you can then repatriate the sales proceeds. So they're the three most common ways of doing it. The advantage for a foreign group currently, and probably for much of the next decade, is the relative immaturity of the commercial property markets to local players, and the strong attraction of residential real estate to local players, which means that they're putting less and less of their capital allocation to commercial real estate, which still leaves us foreigners with somewhere to play.
Richard, just for a second to comment on onshore financing and the degree to which you raise equity onshore and how far you lever your what's the gearing that you usually employ there?
Yes. Well, typically across the banking industry, you're looking at maximum gearing of 50%. So we've gone through a process through 2010 where prior to 2010 we were 100% financed by European and North American banks. Mm-hmm. And through 2010 we refinanced $500 million of financing, 1.5 billion RMB of financing, and added another 1 billion RMB of development financing, all with Chinese banks. And certainly, in our experience, the Chinese banks are very, very new to the commercial property sector. So just as the government is clamping on developers, down on developers and investment into the residential sector, you're seeing the same thing in the banking industry. It's much more difficult for them to make loans into the residential sector. But all the major banks in China are now listed. They've got bottom lines that they need to report to their shareholders. And quite pleasingly, even though there was a significant tightening of liquidity last year and in the early part of this year in the Chinese banking industry, for quality commercial operators, whether you be foreign or domestic, business is certainly open and to be done.
In terms of opportunities, I think it's increasingly changing the landscape. I mean, if you come to China 6 years old, your opportunity is probably in the first-tier cities, by office, by residentials. But as you see in the capital value in those cities has gone up tremendously. So I don't say the opportunity is not there in the first-tier city, but just probably the return will take a longer time to realize. Now what we're talking about probably last years and a couple of years ago, we're talking about opportunities in second-tier cities, moving capital into apart from Shanghai, Beijing, into like the western region, into the northern region, second-tier cities like Chongqing, which is, as you saw the presentation, a lot of opportunities, 30 million populations, urbanization is taking place, and the government is very investor-friendly. As you see, they are the largest Chinese delegates coming to the MIPIM. First time we've ever seen a big Chinese delegates in this very much European-focused property exhibitions.
Before we go, I want to remind all of you that MIPIM Asia is coming up 17 November. I want to thank our panelists. I want to thank DTZ. I want to thank MIPIM. All right. Thanks very much.